Hello, my name is Dr. Rodney Davis, and welcome to the session 1 Kilo of English, Strategies for the Teaching of English. I'm really pleased to be your presenter today at the conference. I know that this session is going to give you some insights into how English is taught and how you can gather some skills that you can use when you teach others English. It's a rather unique format that we have together today. While I'm not there in the Philippines with you physically, I'm able to be here electronically. And I know that there's going to be something that you can get from this session, and hopefully it will improve your ability to teach. So let's go ahead and begin the session now. As we look at this, we're going to cover some background information first about the English language and some facts that you may not have known about it, and then get into those strategies that will help you to teach others English. It's a common fact that in the United States we do speak English, but there are some qualifiers that I need to give you. First, understand that in the United States there are basically 3 different sections of the United States, and the English language is spoken a little bit differently in each section. The North and the South probably have the greatest difference in the way English sounds. It's not so much the words as it is the accent that's placed on the words. Oh, there are a few examples of words that we use differently, and maybe the sentences are constructed a little differently, but for the most part, it's not the grammar as much as it is the accent that we use. The central part of the United States, what many would call the Midwestern part of the United States, their accent also is a little bit differently. So in the United States, when we think of a mother tongue, for many Americans, English is that mother tongue. Although we have people immigrating to the United States from many different countries, and they bring their own language as the home language or as their quote-unquote mother tongue, English is the mother tongue for those who are native to the United States. So if you look at Central and South America, you would find that they would speak Spanish or possibly Portuguese. That would be Brazil. And then in Canada, they also speak English. So the northern part of this area, the New Hemisphere, as it was once called, is predominantly English is the language that's spoken there. So when we talk about accent, we probably could even use the term dialects, and not so much of a difference in dialect as maybe you would find there in the Philippines from those who might speak Tagalog versus those who would speak Visayan, Cebuano, or some other dialect there in the country. We have these regional dialects that predominantly are based on the pronunciation, not so much the vocabulary. We understand each other when we speak, but what we recognize is that someone comes from a different part of the country because of the way that they speak. And you would see that difference, say, in the Philippines, where you might have someone in Central Luzon or in Manila that would be a Tagalog speaker, with somebody who maybe is from Pangasinan or somewhere else where that dialect is a little bit different. So that's the regional dialects that we see here in the United States. And then when we think about that accent, it really does identify us. And if you were to hear me in person and I was not speaking in a training session, you might find my dialect a little bit difficult to understand because I'm from the South, and so I have a little bit more of a Southern accent on my words. But when, of course, I'm in sessions like this, I work very hard to take that regional accent out of the way I speak, because I know it makes it harder for you to understand me. So we do speak English, but there are some differences in how we pronounce it. So here's an example of what I was talking about in a regional dialect. In the South, where I live in the southern part of the United States, in what they call Lower Alabama, so I'm not too far from the Gulf of Mexico. Let's say I'm going out with a friend of mine, and we stop at the local 7-Eleven, and I ask him, my friend, want a Coke? What am I asking him? I'm asking him, does he want something to drink? But the question is, by saying, do you want a Coke? Am I telling him that all he can have is a Coke or a Coke Light? No, I'm not asking that. I'm just saying, hey, listen, if you want something to drink, would you like to have a Coca-Cola, or would you like something else to drink in place of that? We use the word Coke, C-O-K-E, as just a generic term for lots of drinks. Why is that? Well, because where I live, I'm not too far from the international headquarters of Coca-Cola. Their offices are located in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's about 4 hours from where I live. So in this area, predominantly, if you want something to drink that's like a carbonated drink, like soda, they would say, do you want a Coke? Now, up north, if you were out with your friend and you stopped at the 7-Eleven, you probably would say to them, do you want a pop? And in the Northeast and Southwest, do you want a soda? So you see, when someone says, do you want a pop, it's not meaning that you want to smack them, hit them, slap them in the face. You're asking them, do you want something to drink? Well, what is it about the word pop that conveys a soda or Coca-Cola? Well, you know, when you open a can of Coca-Cola and that carbonation, that CO2 comes out at the very beginning, it makes kind of a pop as it fizzes out of the can. And people said, wow, so when I say I want a pop, they're saying, do you want to open a can of soda? Do you want something to drink? So even though we know what we're asking, it doesn't matter necessarily the word that we use, because there's an implied meaning. And so because we're a part of a culture from the Northeast, Southwest, or the Deep South where I live, we can use these words, and people that are from here automatically know what we're saying. And it's true for you. You have regional dialects that are different, but you know the words that may be the same that cross those dialects. I've assembled 3 examples of people from 3 different parts of the United States reading a piece of dialogue. And you'll hear some of the differences in the way that they speak. From someone who is in New York to someone who is from Minnesota, which would be a northern dialect, New York being a northeastern dialect, and then someone from, I think it's South Carolina, who has a southern accent. So listen to these examples, and you'll begin to hear a little bit of the differences. Now, at first, they may all sound the same to you, because again, you're not familiar with these dialects enough to know the differences in how people talk. What you may find is some of these dialects are easier to understand than others, but they give you some examples of how people speak a little differently from part of the country to other parts of the country. I've assembled 3 examples of people from 3 different parts of the United States reading a piece of dialogue. And you'll hear some of the differences in the way that they speak. From someone who is in New York to someone who is from Minnesota, which would be a northern dialect, New York being a northeastern dialect, and then someone from, I think it's South Carolina, who has a southern accent. So listen to these examples, and you'll begin to hear a little bit of the differences. Now, at first, they may all sound the same to you, because again, you're not familiar with these dialects enough to know the differences in how people talk. What you may find is some of these dialects are easier to understand than others, but they give you some examples of how people speak a little differently from part of the country to other parts of the country.
End of text. This recording is in the public domain.
Dialect and Accent Collection, Volume 1. The North Wind and the Sun, attributed to Aesop, read for LibriVox.org by Tricia G., in a Minnesota, U.S. accent. The North Wind and the Sun were disputing which was the stronger, when a traveler came along wrapped in a warm cloak. They agreed that the one who first succeeded in making the traveler take his cloak off should be considered stronger than the other. Then the North Wind blew as hard as he could, but the more he blew the more closely did the traveler fold his cloak around him, and at last the North Wind gave up the attempt. Then the Sun shone out warmly, and immediately the traveler took off his cloak. And so the North Wind was obliged to confess that the Sun was the stronger of the two. End of text. This recording is in the public domain.
Dialect and Accent Collection, Volume 1. The North Wind and the Sun, attributed to Aesop, read for LibriVox.org by Laurie Ann Walden, in a South Carolina accent. The North Wind and the Sun were disputing which was the stronger, when a traveler came along wrapped in a warm cloak. They agreed that the one who first succeeded in making the traveler take his cloak off should be considered stronger than the other. Then the North Wind blew as hard as he could, but the more he blew the more closely did the traveler fold his cloak around him, and at last the North Wind gave up the attempt. Then the Sun shone out warmly, and immediately the traveler took off his cloak. And so the North Wind was obliged to confess that the Sun was the stronger of the two. End of text. This recording is in the public domain.
When you think about teaching someone to speak English, there are a couple of objectives that really guide how you teach someone, as well as the strategies that you might use. For example, if your goal or your objective is to help someone improve their conversational skills, then you might use a strategy like role-playing, where one person plays a part and the other person responds. And so there is a back and forth exchange of dialogue. Where if you're trying to increase their written expression, then you might use some kind of translation activity, or an activity where you read the sentence in the language and then you have to fill in the blank. Different strategies are used for each objective, and you have to know what that objective is before you choose a strategy, so that you can choose a strategy that would be effective in achieving that objective. I've located 7 different strategies that you could use that would help you to teach other people English. And it's certainly going to increase their language capacity, because I don't think that fluency is an event as much as it is a process. Every day you become a little more fluent in the language, and the more you practice, the more you study, the more you read, and even the more you're exposed to the language, the more of it that you're going to remember and hopefully be able to use. Now here's some things that I just want you to remember at the outset. I'm not giving you teaching strategies at this point. These are learning strategies. So we want people to use these strategies to help them learn the English language better. They are not tied to a particular curriculum, so that you can use them independent of the state-mandated curriculum there in the Philippines. Also, they don't require any special training to use. I'm going to present them to you, and you can use them right away. I'm not a second language acquisition instructor. I teach instructional leadership at the university, but I have had a lot of experience there in the Philippines, and also being a native speaker, there's some things that I've learned that help people to acquire the language. And so that's what I'm sharing here, is that you don't need the training to use these. Again, once you've seen the strategy, you can implement right away. Now, these are probably controversial strategies. Like I said, I'm not a second language acquisition instructor, so they may not fit nicely with what you have been taught. But remember, if it's a tool, it may have a use for you as you're trying to help others learn the language. And where did these strategies come from? As I said, I didn't create them. They were adapted from the English Explosion organization, and I've given you that link in some resources at the end of this presentation. Everything that I'm going to provide to you is free for you to use. And so when you see their websites, you can go there and see more about these particular strategies, and I know they will help you. The first learning strategy is listen. The more that you listen, the better you're going to remember the language, because language is not only written, it's oral, and we have to hear it. And so the more that you train your ear to hear the words and the way the words are spoken, as well as how sentences are constructed, it's going to help you to learn the language much easier. To speak it correctly, you have to hear it, because again, it's an oral activity. When we're learning to speak our native language, we take in all of the sounds. Our parents used these sounds, and our mind had to process the sound and make sense of them. Now, when you grew up in a Filipino home, there were certain sounds that your parents constantly repeated for you, and your mind learned that those sounds are important, and they're important because they have meaning. So there are certain sounds that do not have meaning, and they are not important, so our mind ignores them. And that's how, when you learn English, you have to retrain your mind to hear new sounds and realize that those new sounds have meaning, and so therefore they are important and need to be remembered. It's for this reason that other languages sound strange to us, because the sounds we hear coming out of someone's mouth don't match what we've learned as a child. And so our mind says, oh, wait a minute, this word is different. I don't know what this sound is, but it's not English. And you'll hear people say, I don't know what language they're speaking, but I do know it's a foreign language. So here's an example. I'm learning Filipino ever so slowly, adding new words and trying to be a better speaker of it. So for me, when I hear the word ama or tatay, those words don't necessarily mean anything to me. At least they didn't at one time, but now I pick up on that they have meaning. Oh, father, ama, tatay, daddy. Ina, nai, mother, mommy. So for someone who's not learning Filipino or Tagalog or any other dialect in the Philippines, they're not going to pick up on these words. The question that we have to ask ourselves, though, is how do we retrain our ears to hear these new sounds and make sense of them? We do that by listening, listening, listening. I found when I was in the Philippines for a 6-month stay a few years ago as a Fulbright scholar, the more that I would listen to Filipino TV stations, GMA7, and I have lost the other one, it was ABS-CBN, I began to pick up on Filipino better, because I could hear people speaking it, and I would hear words that I knew what they meant, so that I could get the basic understanding of what was being said. Now, I didn't know the details, but I got the sense of what the news was about, or what the person maybe was talking about. So again, listening is an important learning skill if you're going to learn a new language. So, what do you do to listen? Well, you find native speakers that are speaking the language and you listen to them. By doing this, you're going to train your ear to hear these new sounds, and as they are meant to be spoken by the people for whom the language is native. So you're going to learn a lot more from native speakers necessarily than you would from someone who learned the language as a second language. So here are my tips for you. If you can watch American TV or get a hold of American movies, watch and listen to them, because you'll begin to get a better understanding of the language as you hear people use it in conversational ways. Remember that Americans, just like Filipinos, we don't speak the way we write. And so we don't necessarily use good grammar as we're speaking. We're just conversing. We're getting ideas across, hoping the other person understands what we're saying. And so you want to do that because you're going to be interacting with other English speakers in conversational settings. They're going to ask you where you live, what's your name, what do you do. They may even ask you questions. Where is this particular place located? How do I get to this place? So again, it's very conversational. And you want to go to, if you're going to watch American TV or watch American movies, you want to go to American movies and not the ones that are dubbed in Tagalog. So you want to go to where there isn't that Tagalog dubbing, because, again, that will defeat the purpose of hearing the native speaker. You can certainly go to the internet where you can find lots of American TV shows. Just go to YouTube for that matter, and you can find plenty of examples of American TV there. Go to public places where you find native speakers, native English speakers. I found that if you go to the Starbucks at the SM, you'll find some Americans, because Americans like Starbucks coffee. Even in small towns, if they have a Starbucks and there are some native English speakers, you will probably find them there at Starbucks from time to time. So this is some tips that you can use that will help you to improve listening skills by hearing those native speakers as they are speaking English. Here's tip number 2. Don't stress over the grammar. I know that we want to learn to speak correctly, and I know we want to write correctly, but learning grammar is different than learning to speak English and being an English conversationalist. Learning grammar is critical to write the language, but it's not going to help you speak the language. So focus on the conversation first. As I told you before, we do not speak grammatically correct. We don't speak in complete sentences. Remember, we're conveying ideas as we speak. So what I have found is the more that you can spend time in conversation, the better, because most of our time will be spent speaking and not writing. Now, when you're in school, there's probably going to be a lot of writing, and you're going to write things in English. But your best tool is going to be your ability to converse, and that's what you want to focus on first. As you can increase that conversational competence, then you can focus on the grammar, because you're going to work on grammar. And I think you'll be less stressed when you can speak the language and then focus on the grammar of subject, verb, order. I think that's going to be much better for you. Learner tip number 3, speak English every day. That's what we need to tell our students. What we practice, we will improve eventually. So you need to spend time every day speaking English. At the grocery store or in the mall, use English with the clerks, even though you speak Tagalog, Filipino, whatever the dialect may be. Kapapanga. The idea is practice that English. If you see a native speaker, say hello. And they'll be shocked, first and foremost, that someone comes up to them and speaks in English, especially if they're there in the Philippines and have not been there a long time. Speak in English to native speakers. When you're with your friends, speak in English. It's, again, another opportunity to improve those skills. And that's what our students need to do. The problem is they come to school, and in school, English may be spoken, and teaching may be done in English. But when they go back home, they're going back home to mother tongue. And probably their parents are not going to be fluent in English. And so there's not going to be that encouragement at home to speak the language. School may be the only place. So that's why you need to encourage your students and the people that you come in contact with to speak the language as much as they possibly can. How much time should this be done? Well, I got to tell you, there's not a hard or fast rule about the amount of time you should spend speaking English. Again, the more that you do it, the more that you will be training your ear to pick up those English words and phrases. So really, the more time you spend doing this, the quicker it's going to be, and it's going to be a little bit easier with you. So I would encourage you to spend as much time as you can every day speaking English and listening to it. It's just going to help you in the long run. Learning tip number 4. Learn common phrases. Native speakers don't typically speak in what is called workplace or educated English in normal situations. They speak more of an informal type of English. So while you're learning a more formal version of English in your schools there in the Philippines, be prepared for the fact that many Americans especially will not speak the way you have been taught how to speak. They speak in phrases or cliches, idioms, or they even use something called slang. An idiom, as just a definition for you, is a group of words where the sum of the meaning is different than the meaning of the individual words. So you can look up the meanings of certain words, and you have them in Filipino also, where if you looked at what the words meant and then someone told you what the phrase meant, you would say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So I would learn these common phrases so that you can pick up on the language. I tend to try to get them out of the way I speak so that they're not confusing to Filipinos. But even as I work at it, sometimes they slip into what I'm saying. And I'm going to give you some examples here in just a moment that you can see, okay, I need to know what these phrases mean. Here's an example of some common idioms that we see here in the United States. There are a lot more than just this, but I'll go ahead and go through these with you so that you can see them. And if you want to stop the video at this point, you can take a little bit of a look at them. Pause it here. But the first one, you'll often hear people talk about a piece of cake when they're describing the difficulty of a particular activity. So they've just finished doing something and they say, wow, that was a piece of cake. I thought it was going to be hard, but it was a piece of cake. Well, they're not talking about this activity being a dessert. They're saying that it was easy to do. If you hear someone say, that car cost me an arm and a leg, they're not saying that they had to give their right arm or their left leg for the purchase price of the car. What they're saying is it was expensive because, our arms and our legs are very, very important to us, and we would not give them up for anything common. It'd have to be something pretty important to give up an arm and a leg. In the theater, when you wish someone good luck, you'll say to them, break a leg. And that's a way of saying good luck to that person. Do well when you perform. If you hear someone say, I've got to hit the books this weekend, it doesn't mean that they have to hit the books with boards or hammers. It means that they've got to spend time studying. And so it creates a mental image of when someone's hitting those books. That means they're going to those books, they're opening them, and the books are hitting the desk or the table, and people are spending time studying. That's what it means to hit the books. You let the cat out of the bag is another way of saying you revealed a secret. You told somebody something that was supposed to be kept quiet. And again, that has a word picture there. People hear that, say, oh, you let the cat out of the bag. They know exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to say, you told the secret. Now you let the cat out of the bag. When someone hits the nail on the head, they're talking about giving a correct or precise answer, because that's exactly, if you're hammering a nail into a board, that's exactly where you want to hit it, square on the head, to make sure it goes in straight. And so when you say, I've hit the nail on the head, or you hit the nail on the head, that means that what you said was correct or it was precise. If someone says, well, when is this going to happen? You'll say, well, it's going to happen when pigs fly. Basically, it means that it's never going to happen because pigs don't fly. And so you'll hear that colloquial, very common idiom. And lastly, when someone bites off more than they can chew, it means that they attempted to do something that was more than they could accomplish. Again, these are very illustrative words. They're illustrative phrases. If you look up the individual words, they don't mean exactly what the whole phrase means when it's taken as a whole. And you've got to be prepared for this because Americans speak very often using these idioms and cliches. Now, slang is different from idioms. While they, again, have the same basic idea that the phrase itself means more than the meaning of the individual words, as you'll see here. So when someone is referred to as an ace reporter, it means that they're very, very talented. Or if they ask you, where's the action in this town? It means, where's the excitement? Where do you go to have fun? If someone is called an airhead, that means that they're not very smart. They're stupid. They don't really focus well. They may be a daydreamer. When you were hitting the books in that previous part talking about idioms, you may have also pulled an all-nighter, which doesn't mean that you studied 24 hours. It means that you studied a long time. It's not a literal meaning here, pulled an all-nighter. It could mean that, but it also could mean that you just studied for a long, long time. When someone gets bent out of shape, it means that they're angry. They're upset. I'm beat means just I'm tired. He went bonkers means he went crazy. He got really upset. If someone screws around or screwed, which is past tense around, they're talking about wasting time. They didn't use their time wisely. If you're asked to give a straight answer, then you're being asked to give an honest answer. In the same way, if you're vegging out because you're beat, that means that you're trying to relax. You're tired, and so therefore that you want to rest. She had a meltdown is similar to he went bonkers. A meltdown means they got so upset that they had a collapse. They were that upset. She had a meltdown. She got so angry at somebody for what they said or what they did. Don't hear this one very often, but you'll hear someone say, oh, that was a neat idea. I really like that neat idea of yours. It means it was a good idea. If somebody is a road hog, then we're talking about somebody who takes up too much of the road as they're driving. Instead of driving in their lane, they kind of drive down the middle of the road. If you had a rough time, obviously you had a hard time. When you talk about rugrats, you're talking about small children. Children who typically aren't walking and moving around. They're kind of sitting on the floor because they're infants and they're maybe laying on a blanket. Some people call those rugrats. Again, it's a slang term. If you run off at the mouth, that may mean you're talking too much. So these are just some examples of common slang that you'll hear from time to time. And again, they can be confusing to non-native speakers if they're not familiar with them and have not heard them before, because again, they don't make sense. And you can't look them up in a dictionary per se unless you look up a dictionary of slang to find them. Learner tip number 5 is be confident. You can do this. It's not impossible. Others have learned another language, and that's what you must convey to the learners, is that they can do this. This is a possibility. I realize that it may seem insurmountable, especially because you've learned a language already and you're comfortable with that language, and you realize just how hard it is to learn another language. And you know what? It's okay if you make a mistake. Lots of people make them. They do all the time. And we learn from our mistakes. We use the wrong word. or the sentence order doesn't make sense. And so the person you're speaking to you asks you to explain what you're saying. Let the person correct you. I know that when I'm in the Philippines and I speak English to people, it scares them. It does, and I'm aware of that. That's why I'm very cautious, because I know that the concern of the Filipino is they may not speak in a way that I can understand, and they're so polite. They don't want to offend me, or they don't want me to be stressed at trying to understand them. But it's okay. Let somebody correct you and say, that's nice what you said, but I think you meant this instead. So let them correct you. It's the only way you learn. And lastly, maintain a positive attitude. If you think you can, you can. It's all about your attitude. Have a confident attitude, and you can be successful. Tip number 6 is have fun. Have you ever noticed that you do better at things that you enjoy doing? And when you're having fun, time just seems to slip away. The more you enjoy this, and the more you set out to enjoy this, the longer you're going to spend engaged in it, and that's going to help you to learn the language better. There is a little known secret about learning a language. If we make it work, we won't do it very well. But if we make it fun, we make it a game, then it's something that we can occupy our time with, and it will not seem like work, and we will do a better job of learning the language. We'll trick our minds into remembering things because it's a positive experience. So here's some tips for keeping it fun. Don't count the hours you spend studying. It's not important. Just spend some time studying. Don't worry, I should say, about the things you can't remember, or the things that you didn't say right, or the things that you didn't understand. Today is the day. Tomorrow you'll do better. And so again, don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do. Create a space that's comfortable to study in. Don't make it so uncomfortable that you don't want to do it. Because again, the more time you spend studying, the more that you're going to learn. I have found this to be the case, that it's easier to learn a language when you learn it with a friend, because you have a built-in partner to learn with and to study with, and a person who can help you remember things that, oh, wait, what was that word that we're supposed to use here? Lastly, don't make it a job. Otherwise, you'll get bored and you will stop doing it. So remember, keep it fun, because you will do better at things that you enjoy doing rather than things that you feel you have to do. Tip number 7 has to do with native speaker speed. And I think it's important to talk about this for just a few moments. Is at first, you're going to speak slowly, because you're constantly focusing on each word you say, because you want to say it correctly. But you must continue to increase your speed by increasing your ear's ability to hear the English words at native speaker speed. Now, you're going to be tempted to ask them to slow down. Resist the urge to do that, because you're only delaying your ability to learn the language. Ask them to repeat it, but always ask them to speak at native speaker speed, which is very fast, because I've heard Filipinos speak, and they speak very, very fast. And so we train our ears to, I hate to say it this way, but it's the only way I can say it, to hear at native speaker speed. Train your ear. Instead of saying, no, speak slower, no, train your ear to hear it fast. And again, this will come because of continued exposure to native speakers. Practice your speech by speaking quickly, just as the native speakers do. Now, I'm going to speak slower in this video than I would normally speak if we were face-to-face. What ends up happening is, if we don't speak at native speaker speed, too many find that they learned it at the slow speed, and then when they hear native speakers, they struggle to understand. And I've seen this in conferences where they know how to speak English. I know they do. They don't necessarily have the confidence, but I think a lot of this confidence is due because of the fact that they learn to speak it at a slower speed, and therefore when they're interacting with native speakers, the native speaker just goes fast. Now, a very nice native speaker is going to slow down a little bit the way they speak so that the Filipino or whoever, the non-native speaker, can understand. But your task as you're learning is to do this at native speaker speed. This next portion of my presentation is going to focus on some instructional strategies that you can use to help people learn English as you're teaching English to them. This may not be appropriate to everyone in the room, but certainly this may also help you as you're striving to learn the language yourself. So we're going to now focus on instructional strategies. I've already told you that learning a language is both a written and an oral experience. I'm going to add to that I believe that learning a language is a visible experience. It should have visual components to it, because people will remember what they see, what they hear, and what they do. So, by showing them the structure of the language, as I have done here, I showed you the sentence, John opened the door for Sally. So I've showed you the subject of the sentence is John. The predicate here contains the verb open, as well as the direct object, opened what? The door. The indirect object is for Sally. For Sally is indirect because the indirect object is to whom or for whom was the door, the direct object, opened. It was opened for Sally. So allowing people to see how the language fits together often creates that mental image that helps them to remember. And so the more that you can make learning the language visual, the better it will be to help them learn English. Speaking of visual components, so here we have some pictures. I have the word house here, and I've got pictures of house. And I've got the English word, and of course I've got the Filipino word bahay. So we have house, and we also have bahay. And therefore people can see, oh, when I see this, I know that that word means house. Because we're visual learners, we need those mental images, and that's why this is so important, to give it in both languages, the native language as well as in English.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Hooking up words and phrases and clauses.
Conjunction, junction, how's that function?
I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done.
Conjunction, junction, what's their function?
I got and, but, and, or. They'll get you pretty far. And, that's an additive, like this and that. But, that's sort of the opposite. Not this, but that. And then there's or. O-R. When you have a choice like this or that. And, but, and, or get you pretty far.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Hooking up 2 boxcars and making them run right. Milk and honey.
In addition to visuals that you create, I found a picture of a house and put it on a slide. There are some internet things that you can access, some streaming videos, and here's one here that you're hearing a little bit of the music from it, as well as some pictures from this little streaming video entitled Conjunction Junction. And it talks about the 3 main conjunctions in English language: and, but, and or. And what do these 3 conjunctions do? They join phrases and words together. That's their function. And this is a grammatical streaming video. It comes from about the early 70s, around 1974. And these were very popular. Every weekend, I can remember when I was watching TV, during a commercial break on the education TV or on a children's TV channel, they would play these videos, and it would help even English children, American children, learn their language and learn it more effectively. These videos can be found on the internet, and what you have to do is go to your web browser, Google for example, and if you will Google Schoolhouse Rock, and you can see that here on the slide, you will find these streaming videos. And so these are all things that you can show, and it's a very catchy little tune, and it's very visual, and it helps all ages remember the language. And so these are some internet tools that you can use to bring that visual component to your teaching. We've talked about pictures. Here's another one here. Using pictures to help your students learn more about the United States. You know who this is? Well, of course you do. This is President Barack Obama of the United States, about to finish his second term as president here later this year. And so using pictures like this will help you to convey ideas. Remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here you can show that picture of President Obama and talk about that, and that will help students to remember. Can you identify what these pictures are of? I hope you can. But these are other things that you can show students if you're trying to acquaint them with famous buildings or monuments in the United States. This building over here on the left, the far left, is similar to Malacanang Palace in Manila. This is the White House. This is the home of the President of the United States. Its official title is the Executive Mansion. It's not called, the White House is what we colloquially refer to it, commonly refer to it, but when we're talking about the White House, we're talking about the Executive Mansion, the home of the President of the United States. The center picture, of course, is the Capitol of the United States, and you can see that white building there with the big dome on the top. This tall obelisk, which is actually directly behind the White House, across this reflecting pool, is a monument to George Washington, first president of the United States, one of the founding fathers of our country, and this is called the Washington Monument. And it's a large obelisk, about 520 feet tall. In addition to making things visual, it sometimes helps to make them interactive. So if your focus is on conversational skills, then probably using questions that can be used to start conversations would be an excellent strategy to use. So I've listed some questions here on the slide that you can have your class talk about. For example, what is your favorite food? Or how do you spend your free time? What is something that you do well? And there are other questions listed there for you to look at. These questions are general enough that you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about the answer in order to answer the question and converse about it. For example, what is your favorite food? Well, certainly you can talk about that in any language, even if it's Filipino food. You can talk about that in English. So these questions just spur conversations, and basically the way it works is you have your class divided into two groups. One asks the question, the other answers, and then you switch so that the person who asked the question then has to answer another question. And this can be a nice way to get people talking, because you see that's what increases their confidence, is that they've had practice talking and answering questions. Because you'll find that that's what happens when people converse, is that they ask each other questions to get information. And so this is a good strategy to use. There are some internet-based resources that can also be used to help inspire conversations and get those things going on. And on this particular slide, I've got you a screenshot of a website that you can go to. It's free, and it has lots of interactive games and activities that you can use. It's called Woodlands Resources, and that's listed on the resource slide later in this presentation. But this has some things that you can do in a classroom. You don't have to join it. It's just a matter of going to the website and clicking on a link to find things that you'd want to do that are interactive in nature. Here's a larger screenshot of the Woodlands Resources site, and you can see that they have resources for grammar and making sentences. There's nouns, pronouns, adjectives, so on and so forth, and then a whole listing here in the center of interactive activities. I note that they have interactive stories and where you can focus on spelling and on plurals. So lots of different skills on this particular site. Notice that it's an interactive English game and activity site, and this would be very helpful. It's free, again, and would be a great addition to your classroom resources. Here's another website that can be very useful to you. It's called ESL Partyland, and it's, again, things that an English teacher would want to use. So they have lessons and how to teach using English, and quizzes and games. There's just a lot of different things, as well as a contact link. And this contact link will put you in touch with other ESL teachers, and they will be able to communicate with you and you with them, and to give you a lot more information. Again, this is an online site, so you do have to have access to the internet in order to access them. But many of them can be downloaded to your own computer, and then you can use them in an offline session. So if your classroom doesn't have high-speed internet, you can download them yourself and then use them in your classroom at a later date and time. So ESL Partyland is a very good website. Again, it's also free for you to use. Many of us like scavenger hunts, and many of us like to watch movies. And here is a combination of both of those activities. It's an internet scavenger hunt on movies. And you can create this yourself, and then the students can find the answers to these questions on the internet. And there is a website listed here. It's the us.imdb.com website, which is a website that just contains all kinds of information about the latest movies. And so you'll see here's a list of clues that you can follow to find the answer. So what is currently the most popular movie in the United States? How much money has this movie made? What is the movie about? Find a movie in the box office summary you'd like to see. And again, there's just more and more information here about movies, and it gets the students to practice their English, but by using the internet. And so this is something that they can do as a team at the local internet cafe. And so you can again assign this as homework, which it's beneficial homework because, again, it's having them practice their English and their reading skills, reading comprehension. So this is another one of those interactive kinds of activities that you can have your class do. So here is the International Movie Database website, and this is where you can go to get the information listed in that internet scavenger hunt. So here's a screen print of that particular website. It's also listed in the resources at the end of this presentation. Lots of different information here. Here's the box office that I mentioned. It also shows you things that are opening this week. Just lots of information about movies, and you can create, some very exciting internet-based scavenger hunts. Here is something that's a little less technological, but still can be entertaining for your classes, and that is to do a fill-in-the-blank type story. And this is just a short paragraph, and there's a word bank at the bottom of the page. And so basically, the students have to put these English words into the blanks where they make sense. Again, this is great for students to do individually on a sheet of paper, or you can show it on the screen and ask them to read it out loud and fill in the blanks. Again, there's just a lot of variety that you can do with this. So it gets the students to practice reading aloud and pronouncing the words, and then they have to be able to understand what they're reading to the point that they can put the word on the blank as it should be. So again, this is also a nice little activity. Now, if you were curious as to what the answers were on that previous slide, I've put them here for you to go ahead and look at if you wanted to see those yourself. But again, that's probably the way I would do it, is I would give them the blanks, and then as a group, we might read the paragraph together, especially if they're doing it individually. Then I would read this with the answers, and they could check their work to see how well they did. So this is a nice check for what the students are doing. Here's another little activity that can be very useful, especially on homophones. And remember, homophones are words that sound the same but are spelled differently and mean different things. So here you can see in this red box 3 words: there, belonging to them; there, as in a place; or there, a contraction of 2 words, they are. And they have to choose which of those 3 words goes on the blanks. And again, this is something that can be very good practice, because these are hard skills for even Americans who are learning English, especially children, to know which of the right words to go on that line. And which word are we using when we say there? Are we talking about there, the place, or are we talking about the contraction they are? So this is another thing that can be very tricky for people who are learning the language and practice. So I've given you not only the questions or the sentences, but I've also given you the answers. And here are the answers for you to use. So again, you've got the homophones that they need to fill in the blank on the previous slide, and then you've got the answers here. So again, you may use this as an individual activity, or you can use it as a group activity, your choice there. But something, again, to practice, just a very important skill. Now here are some additional phrases that I want to add to your repertoire of things that students need to know the meaning of. Again, this can be used in a class discussion, and or they can be some things that you practice as you're teaching. So for instance, what do these phrases or idioms mean? You ask the class, and then you give them an example. So to give someone the cold shoulder, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're rebuffing them, that you're ignoring them, that you probably are mad at them, and so you're giving them your shoulder as if to say, I'm upset with you. I'm not going to face you and talk to you. I'm going to turn my back on you. When someone is saying that they have cold feet, they're not actually talking about the temperature of their feet, but that they're actually saying they're becoming frightened. Usually, this is a phrase that's associated with someone who's getting married. And so if someone is getting cold feet, means maybe they're not so sure they want to get married. Most times that's what it's referring to, but it could be referred to any time someone is having to make an important decision and they really don't want to do something, and they're kind of wanting to back out of doing it. Well, then they're said to have cold feet. Of course, if a person is hot-headed and having cold feet, that's kind of an unusual combination. Hot-headed typically means they have a real temper. They get angry very easily. To quit something cold turkey means to do it without any delay, just to stop doing it. So if a person were to quit smoking cigarettes, cold turkey means that they don't just limit the amount of cigarettes they smoke, they actually stop all at one time. And that's something that's very, very courageous to do, because it's not easy to stop something, especially a habit that you have formed over many, many years. To break out in a cold sweat is also similar to cold feet. It means to be very frightened, and to be quickly frightened, so that you're startled almost. You see it in horror movies a lot, where the person who's being chased by the monster or whatever gets surprised and they're startled quickly. Well, that can cause you to break out in a cold sweat. And lastly, to be in hot water is not the same as to be hot-headed. To be in hot water is not a good thing. It means that you're in trouble. Although we would think hot water would be great if you're taking a bath or taking a shower, but in truth, to be in hot water means you're in big trouble. So think of a cannibal who is eating somebody for dinner, and they're putting him in a pot of hot water to cook them. That's kind of the idea that's being conveyed by this phrase. Or you're in hot water. In this particular case, being in hot water is not a good thing. It's not a bathtub. It's you're in trouble. The last teaching tip that I would really encourage you to pursue here is using music and dance. And here, again, it's just helping to acquaint people with the culture. It's a great way to memorize facts when you set them to music. Putting a song together that you know and then putting facts that you want people to remember to it, again, just helps them to memorize it easier. Certainly music can be a great way to work on comprehension skills. Singing along with the music helps you to pronounce the words correctly, and the more you do that, the better your pronunciation is. And also, again, it helps to train your ear to hear the words to the song, and you're able to understand the language. Now, a way that you can use music and dance would be to pass out the lyrics of a song excuse me, to the students. And as they listen to the song, they follow along with the lyrics. You can also have them pronounce the words on the lyric sheet to be sure they're pronouncing them correctly. You can even have them do some research on the band that sang the song or on the topic that the song is about. So again, here's an example of if you were a fan of the Beach Boys, you could have them do some research on this particular band and why was the band called the Beach Boys? What was their original name? And how did they get the name the Beach Boys? So not only can you listen to music of the Beach Boys, you can have them do some research and learn a little bit more about the group. And you can even create an online scavenger hunt for that. So this is another way to, again, add to the depth of your class, do some unique things. People like music. In the Philippines, they love to sing. They also love to dance, and here is a way that you can kind of combine both of those together in one venue, and it'd be useful in teaching the language. So here are the tips that we covered in this session today. And so I've broken them down into 4 areas. The learning strategies, how to learn the language, as well as the teaching strategies by making it interactive. And here's some examples of interactive things: using the internet, doing scavenger hunts and activities. Auditory activities that would involve music and then even movement and dance. And then visual teaching strategies where you're showing lots of pictures, lots of streaming videos. And then remember that with the learning strategies, we were talking about listening to people speak English every day and practicing your listening skills, training your ear to hear better. Don't focus on the grammar. Remember that focus on the conversation. Speak aro-aro. So I'm whipping a little Tagalog in there for you. Speak every day. That's the key. The more that you speak the language every day, the more confident you're going to be. And of course, that was the number 4th point here, is that you're going to increase your confidence when you are interacting with people who are speaking English. And lastly, remember that you're supposed to speak at native speaker speed. And the sooner that you do that, the sooner that you will be able to speak clearer and understand better. So here's just a summary of where we've been in this last session of about an hour. Here are the resources I told you about, and some conversation questions by topic are listed here at the top. And then you've got interactive games and activities. There's the link for ESL Partyland. And then here's a great resource, 280 common American slang expressions. Just certainly things you just need to memorize. And so there are plenty more resources that we could find, but these are just a few to get yourself started. Really, the way I found these is just to Google ESL teaching resources, ESL learning resources, ESL being the English as a Second Language, is what ESL stands for. So you can go to that search in your Google, and believe me, you're going to find thousands and upon thousands of resources that you can use, and the vast majority of them are free. And with those resources, that brings us to the end of this session. Certainly, if you have questions, you can ask the question moderator, who will take over now for me so that they can answer your questions live. If you would like to email me and ask me particular questions, you can contact me at this address here on the slide, davisr@troy.edu. Be glad to talk to you about any questions you have about this presentation or others. If you have an event that you're hosting and you need a resource speaker, please feel free to contact me at that address, and if I'm available and I'm in country, I would be happy to be there with you. If not, certainly I can visit with you electronically. So again, maraming salamat. Thank you for your attention, and have a great rest of your conference.